all of this is stuff we can control. Once we make this decision that we're going to do something differently. Anybody know this one? Know what those words are going to be? The 10 most powerful two-letter words in the English language. Some people don't like this because it short circuits some of their foundational belief systems. When I actually grasped this, it's kind of a life-changing thing for me. And this is what those are. If it is to be, it is up to me. Your future is in your hands. You can have that default future. You can work towards that dream. So that's my wife and I. And so why did I leave Missouri and go to Idaho? There's a real simple explanation. You ought to be able to look at me, see that I'm male, see what my approximate age is, and you should be able to say, what was the reason that I left Missouri and went to Idaho? Anybody going to say it?
Elk.
Elk?
Go hunting.
Go hunting. Well, we'll see.
You retired.
I didn't retire.
Your wife?
I never have retired. It's called midlife crisis. All right. So midlife crisis rolls around, and you start thinking about who you once were and where you are now and stuff like that. And when I was 20 years old, I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted to do in life. I wanted to live in the Rocky Mountains and write stories. I grew up a flatland Illinois crop farmer. I got over it. When I was 15, two of my older brothers and I went to Colorado, camped in the Rocky Mountains. First time I'd ever seen those mountains, and from that day on, I wanted to live in the mountains. I said I wanted to write stories. I started writing epic fantasy novel when I was in my mid-teens. Occasionally, I still pull it out and work at it. That was the core of my being, was that other world that I was writing about. And then life, marriage, family, career, all got in the way. And when I was about, let me think about this for a minute. "45, 43, somewhere in there, I realized that my dream had never changed. What I really wanted to do was not be a professor at the University of Missouri, was not have a cow farm in Missouri, and there was nothing wrong, really, with those parts of my life. But I realized what I really wanted to do was live in the Rocky Mountains and write stories. I'm going to show you what our goals were. Get out of debt. So we had a nice farm in Missouri. We had actually paid for it once. Then we built a house. When the fourth kid came along, and we'd been living in a just a 1,200 square foot old farmhouse, we decided we needed some more space. So, and I always wanted to live in a log cabin, so we decided we'd build a log cabin, which of course turned into a log home. And because the rooms in the old house were quite small, you say, well, let's expand that out another couple feet, and let's put in a good utility room and all that. And we ended up with a 3,400 square foot log home that, cost a couple $100,000. And I am given to understand that I'm not a pleasant person when I'm in debt. Now, a farm is one thing, because if you're working the farm right, it's paying off its debt. A house does not pay any debts unless it's appreciating in value and you know that you're going to sell it. So the house made me an unpleasant person. Very nice house, just too much debt. So this is the first time in my life, by the way, that I ever wrote down a goal. This was 2002, 46 years old. First time in my life I'd written down a goal. I'd been given a talk like this telling people, oh, how important it is to have goals and all that, but I didn't actually do it. I just knew that everybody says you got to have goals to be effective. So I told people the same thing, but I didn't do it. In 2002, we actually wrote down goals. Get out of debt. Stay out of debt. So that meant I wasn't going to go to the Pacific Valley and buy a $10 million ranch. I wanted to live adjacent to public land. I think public land, and you will never ever hear me say government land or federal land. That 2.5 million acres out my back door, I own that. You own that. We share it with 320 million other Americans. We all own that land. I got a mountain. I want to have a mountain out the back door so that if I get up in the morning and say, you know, I'm going to go to the top of the mountain today, I don't have to organize myself to be gone for 5 days, drive 1,000 miles to get to the first mountain. I just wanted to be able to walk out the back door, go to the top of the mountain. And as somebody said, ready access to good hunting and fishing. There's nothing in there about cows. There's nothing in there about grazing. There's not even, well, I was going to say nothing about money. Well, the debt certainly is. And so that's why we moved, is so that I could go to the mountains and write stories. Now, I still had to make a living somehow, and that's why I do what I do. So I had had this dream since I was 15. I think that's 27 years from the time I was 15 to the time I was 42 that I always dreamed of living in the mountains, but I never got there. In 2002, kind of midway through the year, we wrote these goals down. April 1st of 2004, I was living in the mountains and started living the dream. And that is what I do every day that I'm at home, is I'm out there living the dream. Why? Because we wrote it down and said, this is what we're going to do. And then when you write those down, all of your attention, you know, adheres to that point and you work at it. So that was the log home in Missouri. The property we bought has a 700 square foot homesteader's cabin on it, partially modernized. We lived there the first 6 months, then we didn't. But it did force us to change, you know, some of our lifestyle. Where we live, it's called the Pacific Valley. This is Lemhi County over here. This is Custer County. White is privately owned land. The orange is Bureau of Land Management, and then green's National Forest. 94% of our county is public land. I love it. I love it. Because I can hike anywhere I want on that. I can camp out anywhere I want on that. I can hunt anywhere I want to on that. There's not a lot of water, so I can't fish anywhere that I want to. But where there is water, I can fish anywhere that I want to. We can establish a mining claim. There are areas where we can go and cut logs for building stuff. It does cost, you know, we have to pay $4, you know, for a tree that we can turn into a log and stuff like that, and then harvest it and bring it out and all that. But yeah, that's living the dream. Right there's where the house sits. That's 6,000 feet. That's 10,200 back there. So yeah, literally I got a mountain out the back door. We fish, we hunt, we enjoy life. We created our future because we made decisions about goals. So when you create your future, you can build in these things here: the free time, the family time, the hobby time, the education time, the mentoring someone else time. That's why I say farming and ranching does not, and okay, so we sold our herd, and we sold our farm in Missouri, we sold our herd in Missouri. I did not expect that I'd ever be involved in day-to-day ranching operations again. And now I manage more land area, more cattle than I ever did when we had our own place. Huh. Just living the dream. So we look at a lot of families, and when I decided to go into the consulting business, I thought I would design grazing cells for people, make recommendations on range improvement, pasture improvement, maybe some suggestions on, herd structure and genetics and stuff like that. You know what I find myself doing? Family mediations, interviewing managers, getting managers fired, sorting out family disputes. I don't enjoy that part of the job a lot, but we look at these happy ranch families, and then we have to think about, what are they really saying? The old man's there, and he says, here's what we're going to do. The 40-year-old something son who has never made a management decision in his life, he is thinking, the old geezer's got to die someday. And then the daughter-in-law, who maybe she's from a successful ranch on the other side of the mountain range, she's thinking, why doesn't he ever ask my opinion? From the outside, we see a lot of what we think are good, solid family values and relationships. And some of them are, but a whole lot of them are not. And the ones that are, what I have found through my experience, and I've been 17 years in the consulting business now, the families who are tight and unified, one of the things they have in common is, guess what? Written goals that everybody agreed to and they work towards. The families that are in chronic discord, they just do not have a fixed plan of where they're trying to go. And so everybody's doing their own thing on it. So these are important things, agreed upon by everyone in the operation, written down, and then very importantly, periodically reviewed and updated. Because you know what? Sometimes you can set a goal and you find out this really isn't realistic in the context of our resources or our family dynamic, and you might have to adjust it. Now, communicated clearly from management to labor, and I'm sure there are several of you in here who think of yourselves as being a one-person operation, management, labor. Well, I'm both of that. You know what? It is terribly, terribly important that if you are both management and labor, that you communicate between those sides of the business. So, in the consulting business, my office time rate is $75 an hour. Flood irrigation. I love going out in the spring with my tarp dams and a shovel and put water where it hasn't been before. I am still working so hard to make water run uphill. One of these days I'll accomplish it. I will make water run uphill. I enjoy doing that. What's that job worth? I can hire a Mexican, and this is not said disparagingly in any way. Most of the grunt farm and ranch labor where we live is Mexicans. I can hire a Mexican to do that for $10 an hour. Economically, it would make way more sense for me to hire someone to do that work so that I could stay in the office and crank out, those consulting reports at $75 an hour. But you know what? I need the time on the shovel to maintain my sanity. And we all have those things. There are the labor part of this business that we just love doing it. And we want to do it. And we don't want to give it up for someone else to do it. The management side of your mind, the management half of the brain, sometimes has to step in and say, no. That does not make sense. I need to be doing this. Marketing our products, doing some strategic planning, sitting at the spreadsheet, shoeing the horse, feeding the hay, moving the water. Someone else might be the one who should be doing that work and not you. So when we think about this management communicating to labor, don't think that is just when you have multiple people in the business. It is the division of management and labor within yourself that you sometimes have to manage. Okay, so everybody going the same direction on your place? I don't know. We have two things that we're going to talk about, strategic goals and objectives. So strategic goals, these are the big picture. This is where do we want to take this business we're in now, and where does it need to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? This is the point where I ask, how many people in this room have actual written strategic goals for your farm or ranch? 3 people? I mean, you don't have to be embarrassed that you have these things. It's a good thing. 3 people out of 21 admitted, yeah, maybe 3.5 to 4. I don't know, if you think about it. And a lot of people say, you know, I don't have it written down, but it's solidly in my mind. And I'll offend a few people from time to time because I sometimes do get crass in my language. I'm going to say bullshit. You might think that it's solidly in your mind, but your mind is very fluid, and it subtly changes things. Well, that's not really what I meant, and when it's written down, it's a little more firm guide. So guess what you get to do now? For those of you who have never written down your goals, this is where we're doing it. 5 minutes, 3 strategic goals for your business or your personal life, or 1 for your personal life, 2 for your business, 2 for your business, 1 for, you know, write it down. But everybody, we need to get some goals written down now. All right, then the next layer that we have here is what I call tactical objectives. And that's the, what are you going to do? You've established this goal now, how are you going to get there? So this is the roadmap of how you're going to get to the goal. And so if we come back to our dairy example here, we got the goals: become a grass-based dairy, and you know, I could list out the 60 cows and all that rest. So we need to buy 40 Springer heifers by February 1, complete the milking parlor by March 1, subdivide the pastures for 12-hour rotation by April 1st. So here's the step-by-step. This is what we have to get done to get there, and it's very important that for each of these here, you have a budget for it and a cash flow plan. And on the, I think it's, it might be the very last session on Friday, for those of you who are staying for that school, you know, we're going to go into cost-benefit analysis. And when we look at a project, you know, I can take almost any kind of pasture improvement or ranch improvement project, and I can show that in the long term, that would be a profitable, it would improve profitability. But there's 2 sides to doing these improvement and development projects. One of them, is it financially feasible? Is it economically valuable to do it? And the other one is, how are you going to pay for it? And for most of us, that's a cash flow situation. The types of ranch improvements that we're going to talk about over the next few days, there aren't very many bankers that lend money for those type of projects because there's no liquidity to them. And they don't necessarily add to the capital value of the land in the prevailing real estate market. And so you know, we might, you know, do a budget and say, okay, in 7 years this is going to, you know, pay out. A lot of us don't have 7 years of flexibility. So we got to figure out, how do we do something that in a single year, or maybe at most 3 years, is going to be completely recover our investment. Now, if you make an investment in some kind of ranch improvement like stock water development, fencing, those sorts of things, they're going to have a much longer life than the horizon over which you're trying to recover your capital investment. So if you make a, you know, $50,000 investment in ranch improvements, and it does in fact raise productivity and increases your gross margin, if you pay that off in 2 years' time, the next 15, 20, 25 years that you're managing the place and that tool is still working for you, you've got a better margin in all those future years. Like I said, we can pencil it out and say, oh yeah, in 7 years and 15 years it pays off, but we got to get it paid off a whole lot faster than that just because it's our money tied up in there. So we do this here. I am very much about planning and crunching numbers. I am a spreadsheet geek. I don't know how I became that way. Well, actually, I do know. A lot of the tools that I use in my consulting business, I actually developed in the early and mid 80s, and I've just been refining them. When we, were making a decision about to buy more property to expand our operation in Missouri, I had to figure out whether or not this was going to work. And so that's when I started, even though, I'm a biologist, basically. I'm not an economist. Hey, I made 1C in college, and that was an Econ 101. All right. And you know why that happened? Because I'd already taken like 3 courses in ag econ, and agricultural economics is so screwed up with government interference and all that. If you learn your first economics in agricultural economics, real economy doesn't make sense to you. So, yeah. If it won't work on paper, it probably won't work out on the ground. So make sure that it looks like it's going to be feasible on paper and go from there. All right, so tactical objectives, 5 minutes again. You can do this, different ways. You can take one of your goals and write 3 tactical objectives that are going to move you towards accomplishing that goal, or you can take each one of your goals and write out a first step objective. So this is something that basically, when you go home from this school, what are you going to do? What can you start with to get you moving towards your goal next week?